Hi, I'm Patricia Grabarek.
And I'm Katina Sawyer, and welcome to the Worker Being Podcast. Today, Patricia has an article for us. So,
I do.
would you tell us a little bit about what we're going to learn today?
Yeah, so the article I read is actually one that took place in a nursing population. So it feels very relevant to today. I'll tell you why. Mostly it's about perceived control. So, being able to have control over situations at work and how that relates to emotional exhaustion and vitality. So, spoiler alert, when you feel like you've got control, you're less exhausted and you feel more alive, you feel more vigorous, vivacious, all those good things. And there's an element of identity commitment and self esteem as well in this article. So,
Ooh,
about how you feel about your job and yourself and how that can actually impact all of this to your wellness.
that's awesome. That's very cool. And I think that studying anything in nursing populations is extremely relevant right now. So I'm sure there are some nurses out there who will listen and be particularly interested in understanding this value of personal control. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Yep. I think it's
Um,
really relevant to them and I think it's really relevant to a lot of us. So should be should be a fun discussion.
Yay. Awesome. I'm excited. So, how is your life right now?
My life is pretty good. So again, for everyone listening, our fabulous producer Allie should have probably just had a baby. This is launching in June, and we are recording in April, getting ready for her leave. So right now in April, it is a little bit of a gloomy day, but it's been a busy day, so gloomy isn't necessarily bad. Sometimes that helps me focus and not get distracted by wanting to be in the sunshine. So, yeah, pretty good day. How about you?
I don't even know what kind of day it is outside. I like literally have a problem. I think it will change in our new house because there's so much more like like natural light in the like living space. But
Mm-hmm.
because our house is like long and skinny, there's only like the back room has like windows, but everything else has no windows. So if I just like stay in my like living room and my room for most of the day, like I don't even sometimes know what's happening outside. Like it's bad. I have no idea what the weather was like today. I didn't go outside once. And like
Well,
normally that would be not true. Like I probably would go out and do something on a normal day if it wasn't quarantine. But since quarantine has happened, like I realized last week, like 4 days went by and I never went outside one time.
oh my gosh.
I know. I was like
Wow.
really just not going outside. So and then I like went and took like walks and stuff like that on the other days because our house is like a 2 mile walk from here. So we walk there, we stop in, we say hi to the new house, and then we walk back. So it's like it's a decent walk, like 4 miles. So we do that like three we've been doing that like 3 times a week or something like that. But yeah, I've just kind of been like holed up today. And also I have to start packing stuff, so I feel like whenever you're packing, you're just kind of like sucked into your house and not like out of your house.
Definitely. Packing is the worst. I
I hate it.
absolutely hate it. Ugh. I don't
It's
envy
very
that.
irritating. No, I
But
don't
you will
envy me
have
either.
a fabulous house of your own
Yes.
at the end of it. So it's
Yeah.
okay.
Yes. That part I am excited about. And it's also, since it's only like a 5 minute drive away, like so many things about the other move made it seem so much more overwhelming. Like it was 4 hours away. It was, which isn't like super far, but like it's definitely like mentally a big difference than moving 5 minutes away.
Right.
Um, and I had like a house full of stuff that I hadn't gone through in 7 years. And so that was like a big undertaking, and like a basement. Like that house had like almost more space than I needed. So like I didn't never have to edit. Like there was always space to like throw stuff. And so then I like had to edit so much stuff, and that took forever. So I feel like this is like feels a lot more manageable, but also like it's just like mentally doesn't feel the same because I'm like, oh, we're like moving down the street. Like that's fine.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I hate moving so bad. But also we have movers this time too, which like Last time we had movers from DC, but that was the first time we ever like had money to get movers. And so like all the other times we've moved all the furniture by ourselves, and that is like the worst.
Right. I agree. I agree. This last time we moved, we also had movers, and I was like, I never again. Like,
It's so much better.
I
Oh my
I
God.
can't move without movers because
Well, yes, it's a
wow.
little ridiculous when we have all this heavy stuff. I remember when Brendan moved out of his apartment when he was moving into the house in Wayne where I was. When we moved him out of his apartment, like he didn't get movers. It was like a 1 bedroom apartment. Like he didn't have a ton of stuff, but like legitimately, like if you're gonna have two people move a bunch of stuff, and you think like who are the two people that I would want to, who I think I would trust to be the best movers in this situation, I don't know that you would pick Brendan and I. Like that doesn't seem to be the best combination. And he had like 2 flights of steps in his apartment building, and outside there was steps going up to the door of the apartment building, and we had to carry all the stuff across a lawn and like kind of up a hill into a
Oh
truck.
my
So like
gosh.
it was just like furniture, like we were carrying all this stuff, and I was just like, after that I was like, I will literally never do this again. It was like horrible. There were certain things where I was like, I don't think we can carry. Like physically, I don't know that we are going to make it. Like I might get crushed by a dresser on the staircase. Like I don't know.
Oh man.
And like legit, there were like several times where I was just like, help! Like I just like slowly melted to the ground with like the furniture like on top of me.
Oh
So
my gosh.
we're not doing that ever again because that was really
Yeah.
sucky.
No, that's bad. I'm
Yeah.
I mean, I'm never doing it again either, but I am lucky that like Danny is a competent mover.
Yes.
Like he's the guy that you would want to
Yes, you
bring
would want
over.
him.
Like he's a
Yes, we would
strong
draft him.
guy.
Yes.
Yeah, he like has the spatial awareness. I lack that
Yes.
completely.
I don't
So
have it either.
like that when I moved with him before with when we moved actual furniture ourselves, it was awful, but you know, he could carry most of the furniture and I would just have to support it. So that helps a
Right.
little bit. I wouldn't have to carry a ton of weight myself. And
Yeah.
then, like I said, with his spatial awareness, like he knew where we should move and put things, and I just kind of had to follow along. And it's hard to let go of control for me. So
Yes.
that was the hard part for me to just like trust that he knows what he's doing, but he knows what he's doing way better than me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I hate it. I know I should never move things. I'm not that strong, and I literally don't understand how things fit through other like how do you fit
I
something
don't
through a door? I
either.
can't do it.
I don't either. I'm like, I don't know. And then also height plays a big role because like
Yeah.
if you're taking stuff down steps,
Mm-hmm.
you have to lift it high enough that it can clear. And if it's heavy and I have to like basically hold it over my head to get it off the ground,
Yeah,
it's like not
it's true.
good.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, there's a lot about it that doesn't work. Like I feel like the actual strength part of it, I'm like kind of okay. It's like the height that I'm just like I
Yeah.
can't, because like the strength plus the height, like I can't bench this dresser over my head and carry it down steps. But
Right.
like under normal circumstances, I could probably pick it up and carry it across a floor. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, whatever. So we're not moving anything like that, and that's good because I cannot, wouldn't be good.
Yeah. I agree. I understand. I'm
Yeah.
glad you have movers too.
Yes, me too. Yeah. So basically, I'm just anticipating moving, and and not going outside. Apparently, that's what's been happening to me. But I am, speaking of, it's hard for you to relinquish control when moving. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about control in the workplace.
Good transition. I'm very proud of that transition.
Thank you.
But yes, I can talk about control in the workplace. So let me tell you the article first. It's called When Does Feeling in Control Benefit Well-Being? The Boundary Conditions of Identity, Commitment, and Self-Esteem. And it's written by Allison Gabriel, who we featured on the show before. So we'll link to her episode when we interviewed her. And Rebecca Erickson, James Diefendorf, and Daniel Krantz. And it's actually in press right now. So it'll be a 2020 publication. And it was published in the Journal of Vocational Behavior.
Awesome. That's
Yes.
exciting. So
Yes.
what are the big takeaways, or how do you want to kick this off?
Yeah, so let me talk about a couple concepts, and then we can talk about what they found. So I mentioned perceived control. So that was their big thing, right? And so this is defined as an event-specific belief. So they looked at like stressful events or like major things that happen throughout the workday, and asking people how they felt that they could affect the change or impact the outcome of that thing, that event, or specific task or whatever. So they looked at perceived control. And then they also looked at things that we already know about. We've talked about emotional exhaustion a lot. So their well-being metrics were emotional exhaustion and psychological vitality. And vitality we've talked about as well. So that's like energy and vigor throughout the day. So what they were looking at was understanding how somebody feels about their work events and how that impacts their wellness. And they looked at nurses. So this was a 6-day diary study. So we've talked about diary studies before. It's basically where people get asked questions at the end of the day or different parts of the day. In this case, it was all at the end of the day. And just trying to understand people's experiences from day to day. So now we're looking at how things fluctuate from day to day, not just across people, right? But at looking within the person is this type of approach.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So they were looking to see how these things fluctuate over the course of the day. Do you know when they measured what? So were they looking at it like across day, like something in the morning predicts something at night, or something at night predicts something the next morning?
So what they did is they looked in the evening or at the end of the day, at the end of each shift, not day, because right, these are nurses, so it could be any time throughout the day. So at the end of each shift, the individuals were asked to describe the most salient event that occurred. So they were basically asked, well, here's the exact quote. It says, "Please consider a memorable event from today's shift that is sticking with you. Who was involved, what happened, and what was the outcome?" So they asked people to describe something that happened while they were there. Then they asked them to talk about, they answered a few questions about how in control they felt. And then they answered some questions about their wellness. So those were all done at the end of each shift.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
Yeah. So I can give you some of the questions they asked too. So they asked the perceived control questions. They were asking people like if they felt powerless during the event. They asked them, one of the other statements was, "I felt that I was able to cope with the event." So trying to understand how people felt about how much control they had over that specific memorable thing that happened during the shift. Then they also, as I mentioned, measured emotional exhaustion, which included things like I feel emotionally drained, I feel burned out, I feel used up. And then psychological vitality, which is I feel alive and vital, I feel alert and awake.
Okay, awesome. So they were basically asking people to recall an event that had happened. Then they're asking things about how much control they thought they had over that event. And then they're asking people questions about how well they feel at that time period.
Yes.
Cool.
So, the results.
Yes.
All right. So, I'm going to give you the first bit of results, and then we're going to talk about a couple other things. So, the first main thing that they found is basically that if you feel you're in control over these important things at work, right? So, if you perceived a control over that event that they mentioned, then the nurses had lower exhaustion and higher vitality. So, and this was also, it's important to note, regardless of whether the event was good or bad. So if I had a horrible event, so let's say I'm in the ER and I saw a really, really terrible situation come in, a really bad accident or whatever, and I had this thing, that's the thing that's on my mind right now. Even if it's terrible, and even if the event was not resolved. So let's say there was a patient that came in and, you know, had this bad accident and had a really bad arm break, whatever, and I feel really bad about that, and it's still not resolved, like the person has to have surgery, whatever, that doesn't matter. It could be a totally negative event without a resolution yet. And if I felt like I could control the situation, I would feel less exhausted and more have more vitality. So yeah, it doesn't matter if it's a good or bad event.
That's really, really interesting. So no matter the valence of the event, I am feeling good if I felt I had some control. Do they discuss why control has this impact? Because you would think, like, if I had a bad day, I had a bad day, and I would think about the bad event that's occurring, the content of the event, as opposed to whether or not I could control it. So it's a little bit counterintuitive that that would be the case. Did they have kind of an explanation for why control mattered so much?
Well, the idea is that so as they were looking at the different research articles before theirs, like through the Lit Review, they were talking about how there's a lot of support that having low control over work events tends to increase distress and well-being, or ill-being, the opposite of well-being.
Hmm.
So there's research out there that shows that they also looked at identity, commitment, and self-esteem, which is important. So I'm going to bring that up now because this actually kind of ties in nicely to your question.
Okay.
So in addition to perceived control, they thought, okay, if I have a very high commitment to my identity, so what that means is, like, I value the fact that I'm a nurse in this case, right? I put a lot of value into the fact that I am a nurse. I'm committed to the fact that I'm a nurse. If that's the case, then things that have an implication for that identity are going to be more important to me. So that means events at work, like this really bad car accident that I made up in my head. So let's say you have this bad car accident, and how I handle that situation really has implications for my job as a nurse, right? Like, if I do a good job with this patient, then I'm going to feel good that I'm good at my job, that I'm it just basically, it's a really important thing that's tied to how I feel about my job and my commitment to my job, right?
Mm-hmm.
It makes that event more meaningful.
Okay.
So that's a big thing here, is like, if I have that commitment to my identity, then that event that I'm recalling at the end of the day is more meaningful to me.
Okay.
So that's one thing they were talking about, identity commitment. So the more committed somebody is to their identity, the more likely it is that if there's a discrepancy, meaning that I don't, like, maybe I'm a nurse in a situation where I have no control, I can't help the patient, I have zero control over the situation, and therefore that's gonna impact me more. Like, I'm gonna feel bad about
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it exacerbates the negative impact of a bad event that I didn't have control over. Does it do anything to make, but if I have control, I still feel equally as positively. So so it only has like that negative impact if I have less control?
So that's the theory, and what they find. So let me first give you a couple of examples, because I feel like, in case I'm not explaining identity commitment that well, I want to give some examples of some items. So
Yeah.
when people are being asked about that, these are the questions they use. They said, I get a great deal of satisfaction and fulfillment from being a nurse. Being a
Hmm.
nurse is very beneficial and rewarding in terms of my future. People say I'm right to think being a nurse is important. I get praised for being a nurse, right? So it's like all these
Mm-hmm.
positive things about their job and who they are, and like that connection between themselves and that identity as a nurse.
Yeah.
And what they found was that people that had this higher identity commitment, right? So they really feel very good about being a nurse. They saw a bigger impact on emotional exhaustion and vitality when they felt like they had control. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, what that means is, if I feel this way, then that control is really important to helping me feel better and be more well.
Mm-hmm.
If I
Okay.
don't have
Gotcha.
this same commitment, then that control has less of an impact.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so control is particularly important for people who feel really strongly about being committed to that identity of being a nurse, or in any profession. If you feel really strongly committed to that, then the control becomes even more important to you.
Yes. So that
Okay.
kind of does that kind of answer the question that you had earlier?
Yeah. Yeah. So if I'm a manager and I know that there are people on my team who are particularly committed to the profession, that they're the people who I need to focus even more on making sure that they have control or as much control as they can over situations that crop up at work.
Exactly. Yep. So
Okay.
that control is just it's very important for people that feel very committed to that
Okay.
identity of their career.
That makes sense.
The one thing that was interesting is that they also looked at self esteem.
Hmm.
So for self esteem, they looked at, I mean, everyone kind of has a sense for what self esteem is, but the questions they asked is, here, let's see. One of the questions was, I feel that I have a number of good qualities. I take a positive attitude toward myself. So it's really like feeling good about yourself, seeing worth in yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that is self-esteem. And what they found is that actually that this perceived control didn't really matter as much if you had high self-esteem. So if you have an event that happens at work and you have high self-esteem, and even if you had no control over that event, it doesn't that doesn't matter. You're still going to be fine.
Hmm.
So they're
Okay.
seeing self-esteem as almost like a resource. Like if you feel really positively about yourself, then even if you're dealt like a stressful event, that's not going to matter as much because this self-esteem is like, oh, well, yeah, I didn't have control over this event. This thing was hard, whatever, but I know I'm still awesome. So I'm not going
Mm-hmm.
to take it as bad as somebody who doesn't have that self-esteem.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense because you would think of it like, okay, I'm in a bad situation and I feel I don't have control over it. I could place the blame on myself personally, or I could place the blame on the situation. And you'd probably be more likely to place the blame on yourself personally if you already had low self esteem. So, like, why was I not in control of that situation? Like, what could I have done differently? Maybe I'm just not good at this. Maybe I could have figured out a way to take control. Like, that kind of narrative would be more likely to crop up, I would imagine, for people who are
Mm-hmm.
lower in self esteem compared to people who are higher in self esteem, where it's probably like, well, you know what, that situation was outside of my control. It was bad. I didn't enjoy being in that situation, but it doesn't mean that I'm bad at my job. It's something about the context that's causing this to happen and not something about me.
Right, exactly. Yep. So it's basically what we're seeing here is that having control is really important if you're committed to your role in that job. So as a nurse here, right? I'm really committed to being a nurse. Having that control is really important. Unless I have very high self-esteem, then that control matters less.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That makes sense. That's really interesting. So the people that need the control the most are the people who are very, very committed to their profession and also maybe don't feel as good about themselves. Sounds to
Yep.
me, and I don't know if they looked at this, sounds to me like people who are newer in a profession might be particularly at risk because you're like newer, and so you might not have built up the esteem yet to do it, but also you're still like very fresh in the like that like almost like honeymoon phase of being like, I really like this job, I'm doing well at it, like I'm up to date, I have everything like that, I have all the newest education or like whatever it is, and you kind of come in with like a lot of energy around being in that role. I don't know if they
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that at all, but it seems like that might be like a particularly at risk population potentially.
Yeah, I think you're right. They didn't mention tenure at all. But I think you're right. I think that probably is a very high risk group. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the fact that the study was with nurses just feels very relevant right now with everything going on with coronavirus and how, how the healthcare workers right now are probably very, very stretched and stressed. And there's probably lots of events throughout the day that they can recall and think about how in control they were. And there's probably less situations where they have control.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to think about what we can do. And, one thing is thinking about that self-esteem piece. And
Mm-hmm.
so self-esteem is harder to change, but it's not impossible to change. So if you're a leader and you're seeing that a lot of people everybody's going to be exhausted with everything going on right now. That's just going to happen. But how can you try to buffer that? How can you try to minimize the exhaustion that people are feeling? And one thing
Mm-hmm.
could be to try to boost people's self-esteem, give them compliments and just little things here and there to make people feel good about themselves, can really help, since there's probably going to be a lot of situations where control is less likely right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So focusing on the self-esteem piece might be, um, particularly important under these conditions. And, maybe, ensuring that if you have people who are particularly identified, you're focusing more on buffering those resources of self-esteem, giving really a lot of encouragement to those individuals and making sure that they know that they're like, you know, good at what they do, et cetera, like boosting that esteem because they might be particularly at risk.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think that if there's any way to like give people perceptions of control, so that's the other piece. This is perceptions of control. So how in control do I feel? Like it could be that you can't control that 25 COVID-19 patients walked in the door,
Right.
and that can be extremely stressful. But what can you be in control of? And trying to anything that does happen, trying to allow people, as a leader, trying to allow people to have that control or encourage them to feel empowered to have control. And I think that might be something that can actually help right now. Is I'm guessing if everybody's really busy, then there's probably more responsibility spread to people that maybe don't have as much control day to day. So maybe that will help, right? If I'm a nurse that often has to rely on the doctors, but there's no doctor around right now because there's a shortage of them given everything going on, I might have to make more decisions than I have before. And maybe that will help people feel a little bit more in control. So I'm just like trying to think of like how can this apply, and hopefully that's the case. Hopefully there are situations even in this crisis where people can feel like they have some control over what they're doing and how they're treating patients, and to help reduce some of that exhaustion, because obviously the more exhausted our nurses are, the harder this crisis is going to be to handle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are all really good tips. And, I think in time periods like this, when you're trying to really focus on what are solutions that are going to work, I think it's important to be able to be focused and pinpointed. And this article really helps you to know where to put your resources and like to who, which I think is really helpful when you have limited time and you feel like you can't, focus on every single thing or doing every single thing right. There are things that are outside of your control. Like from that perspective, it feels like that's a really, really nice piece of the puzzle here, is that it helps you to know, like, well, who should I target and what resources should I be providing them? Because we don't want people to burn out, but we might not have time to do this same thing for every single person. So, how do I
Right.
know how to tailor my efforts? So, I think that that's really, really helpful.
Yeah, I think so too. I think biggest takeaways are boost people's self-esteem, and then if possible empower them to have control, or even like as a leader pointing out places where maybe people don't think that they had control of the situation, but making them feel like they did, right? Like, you were able to do this great thing, and like look at the things that you do, make people feel like that helps boost self-esteem. But also if they feel like they have control because you're letting them have it, or you're letting them know that they did,
Mm-hmm.
um, that can help people continue to feel like they have control. So if they feel better about themselves and they feel like they've got some control, it's going to help reduce some of the exhaustion that they're feeling right now.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's really awesome. And I guess, asking for feedback, asking for ways to improve upon processes, asking if there's, something that, even if you just let people have a little bit more control over their schedule, or allow people to have, the ability to provide their input or ideas or suggestions for improvement, like those sorts of things can go a long way. So if you can think about like systemic ways to change the amount of control people have overall, but then, in a situation where there are still going to be a lot of things that are outside of your control, who do you need to target to make them feel better about themselves in this situation, using maybe the limited resources that you also have. So find those people who are maybe not as sure of themselves, and particularly those individuals who seem like they're really eager to be a part of the role. Like that combination might be somebody to seek out.
Yep, exactly. And of
Awesome.
course, I think this is relevant outside of nursing too. So I know we've talked a lot about nursing just because that was the sample they used and it feels very relevant right now. But this should apply across the board. So if you are in a work group and you have a team and you can tell that there's a member of your team that maybe feels a little less confident but really wants, like you were saying, a new person that really wants to get it right and loves their job, like think about ways that you can implement this across the board. It doesn't have to just be in nursing or in healthcare.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I appreciate you bringing this up because I think it's really, really helpful for people who are coping with this right now. And it's also helpful in general across the board because, people need to understand how to make people feel comfortable in times where things might feel a little bit chaotic. So, this might be a particularly chaotic time, but chaos is never, never fully gone, especially in a hospital setting or healthcare setting. So I think this is very relevant.
Definitely. Well, thank you for listening, and we'd love to hear from all of you listeners as well. So please contact us. You can email us at contact@workerbeing.com. You can find us on social at workerbeing on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can also find us on our website, workerbeing.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, concerns, and I hope you're having a good day. Thanks for listening. The Worker Being podcast is hosted by us, Patricia Grabarek
And Katina Sawyer, and produced by Allie Johnson.